This program deals with themes of an adult nature and is intended for a mature audience.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on the KTPF Community Talk Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for our new weekly radio shows. To accompany the KTPF Community Talk Show, we now have our own free magazine to view online or download for free. Visit our website for more details. Also, the KTPF Community Talk Show is supported by Phenomenon Magazine and Beyond Parazine, available online now. The comments and views expressed on the KTPF Community Talk Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the views of ourselves or of our sponsors.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
They've landed.
You're in the right place. Online, on the web, and on air. All over the world.
Talk Radio.
You hear us, we hear you.
Yeah, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the KTPF Community Talk Show, live and uncensored from Manchester at www.ktpf.co.uk. My name is Suzanne.
And I'm Steve.
And over in Essex, we have our regular co-host, parapsychologist and historian, Andy Mercer. Evening, Andy.
Hello, guys. Sorry to tell you this, but at the moment I just checked on the show on our website, and it's just the old repeat stuff going out. It's not our voices at all.
It's live now.
It is. It should be live now. It's probably delayed. So sorry about the late start. We've been having technical problems. I'm hoping that the encoder doesn't stop again because for some reason it wasn't registering the mic. Are you getting anything, Andy?
I'm just hearing the replay of the old show, and I check it.
But you're getting it, aren't you, Steve?
I'm definitely hearing it.
Right. Okay. Right, so let's get on with the show. How are you, Andy? Oh, he's disappeared. No, we are
so
here.
I'm here. I mute myself just to quickly check, and again, I'm only hearing the old show.
I don't understand.
Let me double check. Hold on.
What's he listening to?
Our website.
On the website, it's live. I'm hearing it.
Okay, we'll carry on.
Refresh the player, Andy.
Okay. You two carry on.
We are here keeping the paranormal friendly each and every Sunday, so pull up a chair and relax with us while we bring you a show full of the supernatural, the paranormal and other strange phenomena. Just like to acknowledge those that are listening in our chat room, and don't forget that if you want to connect, you can do so via Facebook, Twitter, Google, Yahoo, or registered to Chatwing itself. So what's on tonight's show? Tonight we're doing a review of the year, and hopefully everything's going to go right. Okay, technically, we have not been flooding. Did you say it was fine now?
Yeah, it's absolutely fine, guys. It's all working. It was a definite delay. It's basically the start of the show is now what's being heard. So yeah, delayed but running.
But we're not affected by flooding. I must warn you that. But it is in the vicinity, so I just hope that everything sounds all right for you.
So if you suddenly hear gurgling sounds, we'll know why.
Yeah. How are you, Andy?
I'm not too well, to be honest with you. I have a bit rough over Christmas. I don't know what it is. Just seem to pick some kind of stomach bug up, and I'm feeling a bit down to the weather. But otherwise, yeah, fine. I mean, possibly having a couple of bottles of Di Serono over Christmas Day might be a reason why I felt a bit rough, but I haven't felt great. So there you go.
You never know. So we're relying on our encoders to stay awake. So hopefully they will do. Because they did go down on us just a couple of minutes ago and everything froze on me, so I'm hoping that everything stays upright. And otherwise,
I have to say, people out there would not realise the complexity of putting this show together. These two make it sound very simple and straightforward. Believe me, it's not. So
definitely not. So perhaps we'll have to invest in some new wires or something for the new year, and get everything connected properly. Steve?
Yes, we'll. Got loads of wires upstairs, but they're all not necessarily the right ones. So we'll go through it all. And
the only thing you're missing is pasta sauce. Otherwise, you've got a perfect spaghetti dish.
Yeah, definitely.
At the moment, it looks like spaghetti down there, I tell you.
I don't
Wires
know.
everywhere, where we pulled them out, pulled them in, pushed them in, all sorts.
Now, as I said, tonight we're going to have a review of the year, aren't we, Andy?
Oh, yes, absolutely, yes. Got a few little highlights. We're just really going to talk about stuff. I mean, I did look at the idea of putting clips together like we did for our anniversary show, but that was too much effort. We're just going to chat about stuff. So, absolutely. But you got Steve's observations first, or should we go straight into it?
Oh, well, we'll go with the observations first.
I'm only doing 2.
Oh, good. Let's have a
So
look.
we'll send over to Steve.
Let's go there.
When you're ready, my love.
I've got so many things open here. I'm having to play silly buggers. I'll be glad when this bit's done, and then I can. Shut some of them down. Okay, ghost on camera. Teens left terrified after black-eyed demon appears during Xmas party. A pair of terrified teens spotted the demon after taking the snap at a pub. Spooked pals Sophie Killip and Kaylee Lomas, both 19, met up for the festive get-together at the Boozer. But they were left horrified when the spectre appeared at one of the party tables in the photograph. The dark-haired child, who appears to have cuts on her head and be wearing old-fashioned clothes, seems to be staring straight at the camera from sunken eyes. Spook Sophie, a student, said that the table was just one down from us and nobody was sat there, so we took a picture of the decorations because they were really nice. There was nothing there at the time, but when we looked back at the photo, we couldn't believe it. It was pretty scary and I felt creeped out. It looked like a little girl staring directly back at us. I didn't believe in ghosts until I saw this photo. No one was sitting at this table, yet there was most definitely something paranormal in the photograph. The pair took the photo at Harry's Bar and Grill in Newcastle, and Sophie sent it to a friend who reads ghost photos. A pal admitted it was the clearest evidence she had ever seen. Last year, black-haired child ghosts tormented many people across Britain, particularly those living in Cannock Chase Staffs, said to be the UK's most haunted area. What do you think of that photograph there, guys?
It actually, I don't know why, I suddenly straight away thought of The Exorcist, like a scene out of The Exorcist with the little kid sitting on the bed and sort of slowly turning around with a demonic face. But I don't know. First thought was there was someone sitting there, to be honest with you. I can't see anything more spectacularly strange than that. But it looks slightly odd. But,
yeah. Yeah, she does seem to have marks on her forehead and that, so...
Yeah, but also if it's taking photographs of the decorations, there are no decorations in that picture unless it's been severely cropped, in which case it's always very annoying when they do that. I'd like to see the full picture to have a better idea of what on earth you're looking at.
Yeah, it does make you wonder, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Well, there we go. There's number 2. It was meant to be a sweet snapshot of Amanda Twig's 2-year-old chatting to her imaginary friend, but the result was far more sinister. In the empty space the little girl had been talking to, the picture showed an ominous black blur and the ghost of an evil child. In the weeks that followed, a series of inexplicable and terrifying events at the Twigs home in Rhondda Valley culminated in Amanda being pinned against the wall by an unseen presence. The 30-year-old says, when she first started talking to herself, I thought it was cute. Then strange things started happening, and after the terrifying night I was pinned to the wall in her bedroom, I knew I needed professional help. Bizarre things started happening 6 weeks after Amanda and Roy, 30, a mechanic, moved into their dream home in Trevennock in March 2013. Amanda says my belongings would disappear and shoes would end up in strange places. Then my daughter began looking into spaces and jabbering away. I assumed that it was an imaginary friend. But she began having sleepless nights and I'd wake up to hear her talking to someone in her bedroom. There were constant banging noises, and if I went into a room, wardrobe doors would bang and floorboards would creak. Recording, capturing the ghoul on camera, Amanda says one afternoon we were watching TV and she started talking to thin air. So I took a quick picture to show my husband. Later, when I looked at the snap, I was horrified to see a ghostly black shadow exactly where she was looking. It made my blood run cold. One night I woke in the middle of the night to hear her crying hysterically, and I went into her room and was suddenly pinned against the wall. It felt like someone ridiculously strong was pushing me back. As much as I struggled, I could not escape. When it released its grip, I was so terrified I grabbed her and ran out of the room. It was then that I realised I needed to take this seriously, and I searched online and found a local paranormal investigation team called Paranormal Now. The Ghostbusters work for free in Wales and can exorcise spirits. 3 days later, they came to visit from Richard Oliver Medium, and he's been performing spirit exorcisms for more than 15 years, and his team. Richard James, Rachel Natman and Martin Milden were soon experiencing the ghostly visitations for themselves. Amanda explains. They were shocked that so much activity showed up on their equipment. When they said a young male ghost was following my daughter around, I was beside myself with worry. I couldn't wait for them to get rid of it. Richard, 39, says for the first home visit we used the PSP7 spirit box and the Ovilus 3 speech recorder, which helped us to detect an unusual energy. We found a lot of strange activity in Amanda's home, cold spots, sound waves, and we were on the sofa talking to Amanda when the room went cold and the sofa lifted off the ground with us on it. It seemed a lot of strange things, but this was particularly scary. The team set about exorcisms, which involved burning sage, chanting prayers, and calling for angels. Richard says we communicate with the spirit to banish them and call for the angels to protect the family. It was a long process, but we were well trained at dealing with this type of spirit. The spirit was a boy of around 9 who followed her around. Once we were done, he was gone.
All right.
Yes, he was gone.
Is that your last one?
That's my last one.
Well, I'll just quickly do my Tupenneth, and it is quick as well. I've put the link on there. You'll like this one. Not a lot, but you'll like it. Watching terrifying moment, ghost lifts lid off a bottle of semi-skimmed milk. Okay, in the incredible frightening clip, the screen plastic lid lifts up for a millisecond all on its own. If anyone still needs convincing of the existence of ghosts, then perhaps this video is it. A family from Nottingham has got the creeps after they caught a milk carton lid moving on its own. It is an incredibly frightening clip. The green plastic lid lifts up for a millisecond all on its own. It then continues to go up and down without anyone touching it. Danny Kavanagh, who filmed the bizarre encounter, told the Mirror, "My wife went to make a cup of coffee and realised what was going on and called me, and I started filming. Judging by the video, the milk in question was a regular bottle of semi-skimmed." A quick look on Google reveals that Danny isn't the first to document the spooky milk bottle lid phenomena. Are milk bottles about to take over the world?
Is that a serious question?
I told you it was a short one.
I tell you what, I still get the same problem. I can't get the videos to play. They never play on here for them from the Mirror, which is really irritating. But there we go.
Oh, you've not missed much apart from what looks as though it could be a cartoon where a milk bottle is flipping up and down.
Well, from what I've seen there, it's the first time I've seen it because Sue didn't show it me before. There's several problems from why I look at it. One, that's a screw top. So you can't just lift it up, end off. It has to be turned to come up.
Yeah.
Secondly...
Yeah, but it's already open.
No.
Oh, it might be paranormal that you can just do it by magic.
But that top is all the way down.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't just lift without being screwed.
Okay.
Secondly, the bottle would have to be smaller than it actually is for that to happen because it tilted up enough to you know what I mean? If you've got something that's smaller, it will only go so far before it jams. And that's what you're seeing.
Yeah.
So it looks like the top is bigger than it should be and it's being lifted maybe by a piece of monofilament.
Maybe.
That is a maybe, ladies and gentlemen, because as usual, it's a video and I have no proof one way or the other.
No.
But that sort of thing is incredibly easy to fake, though, isn't it? A bit
It is.
bit of
Oh, yeah.
string.
It is very
Like
easy
you
to
go.
fake, I admit.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the observations for this week. And now on to the show. And incidentally, we're going to be... We've picked a few videos... not videos, sorry. We've picked a few shows that we're going to discuss. The first one being Eric von Daniken, Believing the Alien Abductions. That was on the 4th of January.
Yeah, that was quite amazing, really. First of all, to have someone like him on our show was pretty impressive. I was very pleased with that. Because, of course, he's the guy that started the whole ancient aliens notion beginning back in the 1970s with his Chariots of the Gods, which sold in its millions. So for him to be on our little show was rather nice. But I was particularly taken by the fact that he now does believe in the idea of alien abductions. I can't remember the guy's name who he'd spoken to, who was the guy that kind of convinced him that it may well be a genuine phenomena. But they said the chap had actually recently passed away, so we couldn't really talk to him. But that, to me, was quite interesting, that he basically changed his mind on that idea. I mean, a lot of the stuff that he's put forward as being evidence of aliens visiting Earth in the ancient past has been kind of debunked, and I think he himself admitted that some of it was speculation. But I don't know, there's still a core of evidence, shall we say, that is pretty fascinating, and I enjoy the fact we had a chance to really talk to him about it. As you guys know, and I've mentioned before, I'm quite a fan of the Ancient Aliens TV show, which, again, 90% baloney, but 10%, I wonder. So, I mean, that show really came to the back of him. So, what did you think of Mr. von Daniken?
I was very interested to the fact that he was willing to actually think about things since he'd done the book, and basically he'd changed his mind on a few things, because he did actually mention that some of his original things that he'd actually changed his mind slightly because they were kind of rushed out in the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, that was it. It was certainly the follow-up books all came in pretty quick succession.
Yeah, and it was also good that one of our old team members was in the hub with us, and Eric von Daniken's a hero of his, so he was able to talk to him.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the same here, really. I'm quite a fan of the guy. The one thing that I was always struck by when I went to Egypt back in 2008, I think it was, that I wanted to see one of the sites that von Daniken had made a big deal of, which is a temple called Dendera, which has an underground chamber which shows what looks like huge light bulbs lying sort of diagonally on their side, 45-degree angle. And to actually see that for myself, it does beg the question of what the hell are you looking at? Because you can easily see a modern light bulb in it. I mean, it probably isn't. It's probably just some kind of ceremonial object, but it does look, for all the world, like a large light bulb. And to actually see it in his books all those years ago, then to finally see it for myself in 2008, I was quite impressed by that.
Yeah, well, it does kind of beg the question. I mean, when you look at things like that, why would they want the Baghdad battery?
Yeah,
They got nothing to power.
Well, it's one of those things. One of the other theories been put forward is that it was a way of electroplating gold onto other metals, silver, I think it was. But again, it's still in itself is a very complicated process. To have suddenly discovered you can do that thousands of years ago. It's one of the things I find that's intriguing. You do look at some of these sites these programs talk about, and you think, well, even if it's not aliens, how the hell did they do things like that? I mean, there were sites. One that struck me, I forget where it is in the world now, but basically these huge stone blocks appear to have been carved and lifted half up a mountainside. And you think, how on earth did they do that?
Yeah. And when it comes to electroplating, we wasn't even doing it until, what, 1920s, somewhere around there?
Exactly.
And yet they were doing it 700 BC or whatever it was.
Exactly. You wonder where on earth these ideas and technology came about. I mean, one of the ones that fascinates me that appeared actually on Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World program years ago, that I think is mentioned by von Daniken in his books, but no, it's been on the Ancient Aliens program. And that's up in Scotland. You have the vitrified forts, which are Iron Age hill forts, which are basically just rocks piled on top of each other. But at the core of some parts of the forts, the rock has melted, and you're talking about sort of 7,000 to 8,000 degrees to actually melt this rock. And every attempt to recreate that effect using technology of the time, i.e. fire, obviously, but sort of coating it with mud and coating it with other stones and trying to get the core as hot as possible, has completely failed to actually cause any melting of this. stone. Yeah, there they are. The faults are just in Scotland, not sort of out of Mongolia or some bizarre place far away. They're in Scotland. And I just find that credible.
Suggest an immense heat that just cannot be done with the tools they had at the time.
Exactly. It does make you wonder.
I mean, the only thing I can think of to do that would be to build a kiln round it.
Well, they've tried even that. They've tried building mud kilns actually around small sections of stone in order to get that heat. But this is in the fort itself. You know, they couldn't possibly have built it on that scale. And yet there it is just in Scotland. So it's things like that make you think, well, he might be onto something. You know, obviously the guy's now become very successful, so it's in his interest to find these strange things around the world. And yeah, some of the things have been thoroughly debunked, but some still remain a complete mystery. So I found it was fascinating.
Yes, me too.
Brendan Moss is saying UFO landing, ?
Where's that?
I don't know, in the chat room.
Brendan, tell us more. We need more information.
Yeah, if that, I was just about to say, perhaps he read my mind. I was going to say, if you've got a favourite show, then just let us know. And okay.
Yeah, I think he's suggesting that maybe a UFO landing could create that kind of heat.
Right. Okay.
Ah, yeah. If that's what he's referring to, then yeah, possibly. This is the question, of course. Something's caused those faults to be formed. I mean, they're deliberately done to create the Iron Age faults that are on top of hills that they build up the sides more more vertically in order to make it difficult for attackers to attack. But they're not really faults; they're just sort of fortified hills. But yeah, and very deliberately done, very much done on purpose to actually build the fort up.
He said, would a rock melt with a UFO landing on it?
I don't know. I've not met a UFO to find out yet.
I suppose it would kind of depend on what they were using at the time. It was like a rocket blast.
Yes.
Possible.
I mean, as we kind of can tell from our own modern science, that anything to go faster than the speed of light is not going to be able to travel in the way conventional rockets work, because you can never get that kind of speed going. So, but it might be that perhaps they have to use that for landing thrusters when they're getting close to a planet. Well, we don't know, total speculation. But it is fascinating that there are definitely sites around the world that suggest the ancient aliens could well have come at some point in the past. Certainly, I remember seeing a program quite recently that was absolutely fascinating. It was more science rather than science fiction or fantasy or conspiracy or aliens or anything like that. It was talking about basically the possibility of finding human-like life out there in the galaxy. And by the end of the program, it was very clear that there were probably tens of thousands of planets just like Earth that are the right size, right density, right distance from the sun, probably have the right kind of atmosphere to raise humanoid or at least animal mammalian life, and possibly human.
Well, rumour has it we've found one so far.
Well, no. This program says we found tens of thousands of them. Once you know what we're looking for, they're out there. And I can't remember the name of the program, but it was a science program. It wasn't sort of alien conspiracy program. It was an ordinary science program, Discovery Channel Science. And it's saying that we now know what to look for. And this is the most recent findings. There are thousands of them out there. And due to what's called evolutionary convergence, the chances are that a humanoid-like life has developed on these planets is fairly good. And they showed a really fascinating example of that. This guy had two animals. They were both what you would say were hedgehogs. One was a hedgehog, and the other one was from somewhere in, I think it was South America, South Africa rather, and it looked like a hedgehog, but apparently it was closely genetically linked to an elephant than it was a hedgehog. And yet it looked exactly the same due to the way it lived and the way it foraged for its food and defended itself. And yet this creature, there was no genetic descendancy from one to the other at all. They just happened to have developed a very similar outer appearance because of circumstances, but they were not linked in any way, shape or form. Instead, the other one, the non-hedgehog, was closer to an elephant than the other hedgehog. That was like, wow, that's really amazing. So the combination of those two possibilities of convergent evolution and the fact that finding planets that are habitable by human-like life, the question, there must be life out there. And of course the next question is, has that life come here? I think once you've figured out a definite way of travelling faster than light, then the answer can have to be yes. I mean, that at the moment is the theoretical problem. We haven't really figured out how that could be done.
Yeah,
there are theories, but there's no...
We haven't, but they have.
Exactly, that's the point. If it is a practicable thing to do, even in theory, but you can show exactly how it works in theory, then I think that mystery is solved. So, yeah, I find it absolutely a fascinating start to our year.
Yes,
and
assuming that these otherworld beings did land on the planet, it would explain a lot of the early gods.
Oh, absolutely, and that's one of the biggest points that George, what's-his-face, the producer of Ancient Aliens, makes a real big point of. We explain them as being gods because that's what we understood, but he said that these stories are all talking about creatures descending from the sky, which definitely suggests the idea that we're talking about aliens rather than gods. So, fascinating stuff.
Because at the time, unless you're talking about Daedalus, who supposedly knew what he was doing, and from that point of view, he was definitely couldn't fly.
Yes.
At that time.
Very true.
Okay, and then of course we moved on to Sue's favourite subject.
Yes, Jack the Ripper.
Jack the Ripper.
25th of Jan.
Jack's back.
Yes. Now, before we go into this, because this was one of Andy's shows, this was round about the time that you actually joined us, Randy, full time.
Yes, we were just trying to work that out this afternoon, weren't we? Well, I think it was it was either the end of January or early February. I think I was coming on and just doing a little bit at the end of the show, wasn't I? Talking about
so round about this time, 25th of Jan, Jack the Ripper. I think it was just after this show that you actually started full time with us.
Yeah, I believe so.
So, ain't time gone fast?
Good God, yes.
Now, Jack the Ripper, now you returned for this show.
Yes, I was a cover, wasn't I? Because we had a guest, had a bit of a no-show with somebody.
Yeah, and you was giving us more on the information about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I repeatedly ribbed the person. We know it was who didn't show up for the show, going on about a certain part of the country. But yeah, it was a chance to go into one of the subjects that really fascinates me. As I say, I used to live. I mean, I'm from my hometown here, but I used to live for quite a few years in East London, so I had a chance to visit the site, which I found absolutely fascinating. And I think I told the story at the time of discovering that my wife's parents were married at a building directly opposite one of the supposed murders took place, which is quite fascinating. Although it's the one that there's a little question about. If you remember, we talked about Elizabeth Stride, the fact that she appeared to have only been cut once, very lightly across the throat. Yes. Rather than very deeply as the other victims had been done, suggesting that either the Ripper was discovered before he was doing all these dirty deeds, or it wasn't even a victim of the Ripper. But that was a fascinating territory. I mean, it's nothing. The thing is, of course, there's no paranormal connections other than people have claimed to hear ghosts and voices and stuff. But it's just a conspiracy, a mystery that is still fascinating. And even though the person who invented the theory about the royal conspiracy and the Masonic conspiracies have all been proved to be complete bunkum, and the fact that the royal conspiracy has been actually denounced by the guy who created it. Nevertheless, it still remains an area of interest internationally, and lots of people still try to come up with their own theories, even though I think there's enough evidence to suggest who the Ripper actually was, although there's not enough to really prosecute anybody as such. But I think it's been pretty much decisively figured out. But it's one of those things people want to keep mysteries going because obviously there's industry behind it, there's tourism and there's books to be written and new stories and new theories to be put out, including, I think we might have a guest next year actually, if I remember rightly, who's going to be talking about Jack the Ripper. So
next week to be precise.
It's next week's
Yes.
guest? Oh, blimey, that should be fun.
A tentative connection, I would think. But more about that later.
From what we perceive of the Ripper and his killings, and Stride could be his ancestors and not Jack's.
Yes, I know I think from what you were saying before that this chap who's coming on is probably related to the person he's talking about.
Yes.
Do you think he's trying to drag the Ripper murders in to try and bolster the popularity, if you like, the interest in his book? Which
I don't know. As I said, it'd be more about that one later on when we talk about who's coming on. But
because he does know his ancestor was actually here at the time.
Yes.
Yes.
So I actually think that maybe the one or two murders that were suggested that the Ripper did it may have been done by this mass murderer.
We'll see. Certainly, as I think we talked about before off air, that there are factors within the way this particular person carried out his murders that are of a very different kind to those of the Ripper. And psychopathic killers don't tend to change their method of murder. They tend to stick to the same pattern of behaviour. So, again, I think it's unlikely, but we shall see. We'll have a long chat with it.
Yeah, we'll see if he's found any new evidence.
What I'm saying. Jack the Ripper had a certain mythology into his killings. There were one or two killings that wasn't the same.
But were still
attributed to Jack.
Yeah, there is only the one, and it's always been linked in because it was 45 minutes before the second murder of the same night, which was definitely Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, I know, but this
That's
is what
it,
I'm saying.
yeah.
So maybe
It's possible. It's certainly possible that this is one of the one that we're talking about could well have been somebody else, and that's the one, as I say, was right opposite. My wife's parents were married, which is quite funny. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the guy has to say. I mean, there's something obviously you and I talked about off air that I would not say as a challenge as such, but I would want him. He'd have to really explain something that those who've seriously studied the Ripper murders for years accept that there has to be. You can't ignore this document. Either you've got a way of getting past it, which I'd be like to hear because I don't think you can, or you found a way of explaining how it fits your murderer suspect.
But it will also be nice to hear what follow-up information he's got about his great-great-grandfather that he's found out, not necessarily connected to the Ripper, but, he was a
fascinating character in himself.
Yes. Right, more about that later, as I keep saying.
I'm deliberately not saying who we're talking about, so keep the mystery going.
Next up, we come to February, and Anthony Peake, consciousness theorist. Bit confused at first, but very interesting ideas.
I think we were the confused one, not him.
Yes,
we weren't entirely sure what he was on about at first, but the more I've read of his stuff, the more fascinated I am by it. So, yeah, very impressive guess. I mean, it was, again, a bit of a coup, really, to discover that post the show, it's been one of our most listened to shows. It's been obviously listened to on YouTube many, many times. So I think we gave him a fair crack of the whip. He seems a very interesting chap, even though he does look like a particular Buddhist that we've talked about as well. They're almost identical to. But yeah, what do you guys make of him?
Well,
I was kind of with you guys. I was a bit lost to start with, and then you start thinking, well, yeah, that bit makes sense. So if that makes sense, then that has to make sense, and you try and follow the route through. And like you said, he was coming up with some very interesting stuff.
But as you've always said, though, Steve, this show, we're here to learn, aren't we?
Yes, very much so.
Absolutely.
I mean,
which is why I get these people on, because I want to learn about their fields and their theories, and bring them out to you lot to listen to.
I mean, none of us would stand up and say we know everything, but
no.
We've probably got an opinion on just about everything.
But we've learnt some good stuff.
But we learned some stuff, and in some cases, I would say that yes, they were wrong and I was right, and still believe that. In other cases, I would say I was definitely wrong.
Well, we've certainly discovered that people can have opinions about things even if they don't know the subject.
Yes.
So, this is quite funny. But yeah, I mean, some of the stuff I've read of his since ties into the kind of thing that I'm very much interested in, the whole the mind being just beyond body and not necessarily just entrapped in this physical form, that there's more to the mind. And he's theorising in his research, is giving a lot of validity and weight to that whole notion, which for me is absolutely fascinating. But yeah, it was an interesting conversation. I think we kind of got our heads around what he was talking about eventually, and I think a lot of our listeners enjoyed it too. So I say it's been one of our most listened to shows.
Yes. Yeah. Now, talking about our most listened to shows, this weekend sees the 35th anniversary of the Rendlesham Forest incident, which happened in December 1980. Around 3 a.m. on the 26th of December 1980, although reported as the 27th by Holt in his memo to the UK Mysteries of Defence, a security patrol near the east gate of RAF Woodbridge saw lights apparently descending into nearby Rendlesham Forest. Now, Larry Warren was on a show for our anniversary this time last year, with Steve Mehrer. But we felt we needed him to come back on to talk more about it and about how he's been since and everything. And we got a blow-by-blow of Rendlesham, what actually happened. And there's been a lot of controversy around it ever since, hasn't there?
Yeah, there seems to be. I'm not following it in great detail, but I know Colonel Holt has started saying things now that seem to be contradictory to what had been said previously. And I don't know if you guys have followed it more closely than I have. That's what exactly has been going on with Colonel Holt or Robert Holt.
No, I'll be honest with you. It all got out of proportion for me, so I stopped looking, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a shame because these stories are important and the people are muddying the waters and confusing things.
But it's like Steve says, at the end of the day, Larry's never changed his story in 35 years.
Exactly. And then I know Colonel Holt or someone associated with him came up with this thing about getting these number messages in his head afterwards. I mean, why did that wait to the whenever it was, years later for that to become, come out in public? And of course, as we know, if it wasn't for Larry himself, the whole thing would have never been made public in the first place. So it does seem to be almost as if they're vilifying the very man who brought the whole thing to the public's attention. But then maybe that's the point.
And they're making a hell of a lot of money talking about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely.
Doing shows and everything. Yeah, I think, unfortunately, in my opinion, when it comes to Colonel Holt, he's changed his story too many times.
Yes, this is often
Way too many times. Oh, I just remembered this. Oh, so this. Come on, man. You wrote the whole damn thing down for a report when it happened. You know exactly what happened.
Yes, exactly.
So why is it suddenly, this happened? Where did that come from? And then blaming everybody else. I mean, even reading stuff on Holt himself, not through Larry or anything, checking stuff out from his point of view, he comes across as quite a bully.
Oh, yeah.
Bullying people, and it's my way or the highway. I mean, even one of our guests did some filming at an interview he was doing.
Yes.
And he basically had to fight to get it back on YouTube because Colonel Holt didn't have a go at him over it, despite the fact he knew it was happening, and it was because the camera was pointing straight at him.
Yeah.
So
I just find it fascinating and annoying that this sort of thing goes on with these kinds of experiences, because if we could present a proper united front, okay, there might be variations in the story, but then that's human nature. But a united front together of those who were involved at Rendlesham when those nights of the things happened, you've got a fantastic story that needs proper investigating, that can be brought to the wider public's attention of, look, something happened that night. There might be slightly different theories. Rather than backbiting and fighting each other, stand together and say, look, we've got slight differences, but that's normal, that's human nature. But clearly something very strange happened a number of nights around Christmas, New Year in the Rendlesham Forest. And to actually hear Larry tell us bit blow by blow, as you say, his version of events, which hasn't changed as far as I can tell from other times he's been interviewed about it, including talking about that interesting photograph, of course, that he didn't even realise until someone pointed out that actually had an apparent spacecraft or something in the sky during the day before. It was fascinating, and to see that sort of analysed and see the shape looks not too dissimilar from the very shape that Larry himself said he'd seen was quite amazing, really.
Yeah, I mean, I read Larry's thing on it before the show, and what he said when he came on the show hadn't deviated at all. I mean, the only thing that was deviated was the way he said it, but everything he said in what I'd read was exactly what he said when he was on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best.
So it's, but I personally want to see the film. I don't think we'll ever get to see it, but whether it be Larry or General Holt, and I can't remember the other two guys, but they all seem to agree that there was some filming done at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and yet it's never seen the light of day, unfortunately.
It's probably been destroyed, to be honest. Either that or it's in the bunker room at Area 51.
Well, that's it, exactly. It will hold out hope that maybe somewhere it's just stored away and we'll actually get to see it one day, but
yes.
Yeah, couldn't catch chickens.
Right next to the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, exactly.
The crystal skull.
Yeah, well, they're both sitting there nicely looking at each other.
Yes.
Maybe the crystal skull's watching the video.
Yes. And then, of course, there was you on Demons.
Oh, demonology.
But before you go on this, Andy, I want you to explain something to our listeners.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to drop this on you because you didn't know I was going to ask you it.
Okay.
But paganism
Yes.
is the fastest growing religion
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
right now, but it's also very misunderstood.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, it's very much a very broad cover-all term for a number of different faiths
Yes, but
and belief systems that are connected but not identical.
Can you tell our listeners the basics, as a lot of things get lumped together, like you just said, things like Wicca and Satanism and all that, it all gets dumped in one thing. But can you tell us the general basics on paganism?
Well, Certainly, the one they're really talking about as being the fastest growing is Wicca, which is a variation of old witchcraft. Although in reality, and I'll probably get slated for saying it's very much the invention of one man. Gerald Gardner back in the 1950s is really the pioneer who formed Wicca from a supposed meeting and initiation with a witch in the New Forest called Doris Clutterbuck. But unfortunately, no one's ever managed to find her. If she existed at all, she probably didn't go by that name. And although he claims to have been initiated into some kind of witch cult in the 1950s, which he was taken along to, I think a few people would say he probably made that bit up, actually. That a lot of the rituals that he uses in the Wiccan movement are variations based around the Golden Dawn material, which is a Hermetic magic group from the 1800s, which was based in London but had offshoots around the country. And there's a good chance that Gardner was directly involved with that organisation. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, any religion, any faith belief system has to have a foundation at some point, has to be brought together and codified in some way. And while it's not directly linked to any particular witchcraft group, shall we say, it carries that general feeling of what old-time witchcraft would have been about. I mean, it goes back to a woman called Margaret Murray, who is an eminent researcher, mainly known for her work in Egypt. But she wrote a book on the supposed history of witchcraft in Europe, which has been, at the time, was seen as a real landmark writing, but has now been completely debunked as being pretty much made up by her. There's very little evidence at all that it's real. So you have the Wicca movement, which is a modern movement, but nothing wrong with that. You know, it claims to have ancient traditions, which it doesn't really. It's got links to more older magic traditions. The other ones which you talk about are becoming more popular at the moment is traditional witchcraft, which is a different kind of branch, which tries to link itself more directly with real, so to say, historic witchcraft, using information for things like sort of folklore, legends and mythology that is readily available. And there's lots of books on folklore. I mean, I've got hundreds of them myself, so I collect.
But when we say witchcraft, we're not talking about Harry Potter.
No, not at all. Real witchcraft is basically the craft of the wise. The cunning craft is another way of putting it as well. It's magic of the land. It's sort of spells and charms that have been handed down for generations. Again, they are written down from sort of the late 1800s onwards. A lot of people collect these things. Things like the Folklore Society was formed in the 1800s, and their biannual journal used to have lots of information on this sort of things, and lots of writers would go out and collect sort of folklore, legends and myths, and that would include charms and spells. And some of the modern witchcraft is drawn from those charms and spells that have real historic value to them. But there are also other groups that have kind of popped up. There's a guy called Robert Cochrane, real name was Roy Bowers, who created a clan of Tubal Cain, which is a kind of a rival, really, to Gardner's Wiccan movement. It tried to claim much stronger historic lineage than Wicca, but unfortunately, actually, it's just as made up as Wicca is. But, you know, so these movements have been around since the 1950s, but I think people generally are looking for an alternative to a very kind of male orientated religion, which of course Christianity is very male orientated, something that's a bit more imbalanced both in the sexes but also with nature, and that's to be applauded, I think. It's so that's really what's growing. Paganism is non-Christian, shall we say. Non-established faith is like a cover-all term, and things like traditional witchcraft and Wicca kind of fall into that bracket. And also things like the runes, which I am quite interested in, as you guys know. I've written a book on the runes, which tends to be more what are called heathen traditions of Northern Europe. You're talking about sort of gods like Odin and Thor and the gods like that. That's, again, is a slightly different system of magic and system of religious belief and worship that, although closely aligned with things like witchcraft, is not the same thing. Again, there are significant differences. So these are all, but they're all kind of based on the land and mythology that's akin to your own environment, rather than being massively universalist. That doesn't mean not everyone can follow, of course they can, but it's more orientated towards our landscape, if you like, rather than Christianity, which of course comes from the Middle East. So that's your difference. But yeah, Wicca is the one that's really growing rapidly.
So we're basically talking about people that appreciate the land and nature and know of the healing herbs and the likes.
Exactly. That they value those knowledge and traditions that are important because, I mean, again, nothing against Christianity as such, although I do have a lot against Christianity, but in a more broader sense, it is a faith that was based in the Middle East, so it's not really got direct links historically to us other than being imported to us. It's one of those things. I have, as you know, a strong interest in Hinduism and religions of India, and people say to me, why do you follow like a foreign faith? And I will point out, well, if you're a Christian, you're following a foreign faith anyway, because it's from the Middle East. And people think, okay, yeah, I get your point. But if you're looking for a real kind of historic faith of Europe, if you like, then you're looking at heathenism, the runes and gods of Odin and Thor and those people, shall we say. So the Wicca kind of isn't like that, but they all fall under the pagan banner, shall we say. So yeah, that's why it's definitely one of the fastest growing faiths, no doubt about it.
So what was your demonology part 2 about?
Well, if you remember, it was never directed at anybody in particular.
No.
But I did think there were certain misconceptions that were being put out about the idea of the existence of demons, that they are, by and large, a Middle Ages invention that came about with the widespread appearance of printing about the same time as the Inquisition. So people were talking about people being possessed by demons. I mean, there's stories in the Bible of demonic possession, but these demons are never named or identified. All of a sudden, around the 1500s, you had a number of documents were popping up, which not only named these demons, told you what they could do and who they were minions of, and how to raise them and how to control them, and subsequently, of course, the Inquisition was trying to claim everybody was being possessed by them. Okay. So my point was, it was more of an historic example of us being controlled by the sort of hierarchy of faith of others, rather than being a real threat. Because you also had the whole notion of demons is something that's been completely misrepresented, because it goes back to ancient Greeks, and a demon was a spirit of any kind. It was seen as being the spirit of knowledge, if you like. Yeah. That's how you could communicate with these forces.
And it was
demons, but they were not demons as in monsters who burned in hell and would drag you down to the fires and that kind of nonsense. It was all to do with supernatural knowledge.
Yeah, and it was spelled and said different, wasn't it? It was daemon, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But that was the origin of the concept of demons as we know them today. But they don't. The biggest thrust I was making is, despite what might appear in the Bible as being kind of vague descriptions of not very nice things, which we could say almost certainly we're talking about by and large psychological difficulties, things like epileptic fits and people who've been having schizophrenic episodes or psychotic episodes. Most of the things you're talking about there was people not understanding how the human brain works, and were identifying automatically that these things are actually demons possessing people. But it's only until you get in the Middle Ages you get an invention, really, of the idea of demons to go along with the witches as well. It's all tied in with that witch stuff we were talking about before.
Yeah, and then we get today. Then we get today that we got Hollywood not getting in on the act, and all of a sudden these Hollywood demons are a fact.
Exactly. It's and that's the film industry for you. I mean, they are perfect material for horror stories and novels. Going back to sort of Victorian times. Demonic possession stories go way back, and then of course you have the phenomenal success of The Exorcist, and a lot of our understanding of modern demons comes from The Exorcist. Just like we talked before about the Ouija board, it was seen as a Victorian parlour game. It was a method of communicating with the afterlife, certainly, but it was seen as no more dangerous or more monstrous than things like crystal ball. Yet today you talk about Ouija boards and people start panicking. Because honestly, it all stems from The Exorcist. It was a phenomenally successful film and scared the pants off of everybody. And, lots and lots of mimics and lots of copies started to appear cinema-wise and novels-wise soon afterwards because of its huge success. And that really is where our modern concept of demons comes from. It's from Hollywood films. That was my main point, really. That was what I was trying to put forward. And the very idea of demonic possession is, because there's so many problems that can emerge psychologically speaking or neurologically that would have to be thoroughly investigated and proven to be not the case where you can even begin to consider some kind of demonic possession. But by the same token, I would say there are people out there who have been possessed by demons because they believe they have. And they will be cured by exorcism because they believe they're going to work. It doesn't mean they're real. It just means that how strong the human mind is.
Yeah.
So
it comes down to faith again, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. If you believe something's going to work for you. I mean, we talk about the placebo effect as if it's some kind of shenanigans or fakery, but the placebo effect, where you believe something has a positive effect upon you, even if there's no medical proof for it, is incredibly powerful.
Yeah,
You know, the whole, I mean, it'd be controversial to say this, but I think the whole homeopathy business is based on placebo, but it's powerful. You know, people believe this stuff works. Therefore, it often does work.
Yeah, I mean, I know you think the cleansing ritual with white sage in the stale smudge is a complete placebo, but
Absolutely, but it works.
But we know from ourselves that it does seem to lift the atmosphere.
No, absolutely. If you honestly believe something's going to have a positive effect or negative effect, it tends to have that kind of very effect that you think it's going to have. I don't necessarily have a problem with that at all. Certainly, let's say the examples of some called demonic possessions that I've read in any real detail, you can quickly point out these things are probably psychological, but if the person wholeheartedly believes a few words from the priest and the funny smells and the hand gestures and that kind of business is going to make a difference, if they honestly believe it's going to work for them, it will work. I mean, a colleague of mine in the therapy business, she basically, many years ago, was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. And she pretty much cured herself through positive thinking, meditation, thought processing, you know, getting her mind set properly. And, you know, she's not had a problem in absolutely years now. But, you know, it was quite serious for her for some time.
Good on her.
And it is down to her own working on herself, not from medication.
Yeah, yeah. Right then, we got to near the end of March, and you ended up turning the tables on us.
Yes. Our anniversary show. 3 years going. Me, you've been in a couple of months, and I was up there in Manchester with you guys, wasn't I? So we talked about how things all got started. So I tell you what, give us a very quick, very brief resume of the beginnings of the show, how it all began.
Well, we were the show itself or the whole thing.
Well, both.
Basically, we were part of a group, and then we left the group, and we saw what was going on during our time with other groups with that group, not between them, but we saw what was going on around the thing, you know, around the actual paranormal community. Then when we left, we got a little bit of animosity, and my theory was, don't fight back, get even, sort of thing. You know, and I channeled my, well, not exactly get even, but I channeled my my energies into trying to keep the paranormal friendly instead, and that was back in 2007. It was just a website, as you can see today, the forum, and I started putting on information on there and everything, and then we were actually invited onto a show called Zone Unknown with Roy Basnett at City Talk, and then after a while we were part of the original team on there, the one of the groups that would go on there and be a guest panel, and when that stopped, we decided that we'd change our chat room that we had at the time, which wasn't really doing much, into a show itself, and stand in where Roy had left off, because I was thinking he was coming back. So the premise of my idea was actually part of Roy's idea for me, Zone Unknown, and I said to him, when you're ready to come back, I will hand lease over to you, sort of thing, you know, give it back to you. But he never come back, and now we've made the show our own, and as I say, it's not exactly like Zone Unknown used to be, but it's got the premise of it, you know, it's got a guest on it, we do observations, blah blah blah, and basically that's it, and that's how it all came about.
And it's all working fine from then onwards, no problems at all. So.
Yes, and I'll be honest with you, I was a bit worried, which was why you might have seen a poll in the KTPF Facebook page, because I wanted to see who was actually listening, because I know we get a lot of listeners on the replay, and I was just trying to work out who was listening, and I was a bit worried about the hosting, to be honest with you, and how we were going to be able to afford the hosting, basically, and this, that and the other, but thankfully we've got a good deal from GoDaddy, and we can actually say that we're going to be secure for the next 3 years. So yes, so
as far as hosting is concerned, anyway.
As far as hosting is concerned, anyway, and so at least we can say that if all goes well with getting guests and that, and we don't run out of guests, and we should be fine for the next 3 years. So we'll see what happens.
Yes, and we were running along nicely there, and okay, figures on the night were dropping slightly, but as you say, we were getting plenty on the replay.
Yes, and now we've been doing the podcast.
I'm doing the podcast well, and we was put in touch with a young gentleman named Ray, and
and now
he's moved us on a little bit further.
Yeah, we're now on Worsley Radio. We're doing our own KTPF radio, which you'll probably listen to now if you're doing it via our site. We're also in New Jersey as well, so yes, not been doing too bad. As I say, we're now doing podcasts which are available on the site, which will get the last 4 podcasts. And I've noticed today that we've had a couple that have been downloaded as well, and as well as been in the time we've been doing the podcast, which has only been a couple of weeks, really, 2 or 3 weeks. Well, probably about a month actually. We've had over nearly 300 replays on it, so yeah, it's been really good.
There you go. That's exactly it. It's one of those things. We might not get a vast number of people listening to us live, but we get a lot of people listening to us post live, which is the great thing, you know. So,
but it's nice to have a few in that are live, because if they haven't got any questions for our guests, then we can actually hand them over to them and this, that, and the other stuff. So it is nice to have people that are live with us. So if you ever want to be live with us, then the KTPF chat room is on our website at ktpf.co.uk.
Yes, come and join him.
And then I think this next one was Andy's first show on his own.
Oh, God, yes.
Keeping the occult friendly.
Our April show, me and my friend Richard talking about the occult, which...
you went to the dark side, didn't you?
Yeah. Slight departure from the usual, but I think he and I just kind of waffled for a couple of hours about various things. We talked briefly about psychic investigating, because we're both... I mean, more so Richard than myself, but we're both friends with Andy Collins, who was the pioneer of psychic questing back in the early 80s, and talking about the Black Alchemist, which is an incredible story, which, you know, I haven't known the guys for years, and I don't have a reason to doubt them, but it's the stuff of Hollywood. It really is this sort of rather demonically orientated black magic alchemist basically causing mischief around the southeast during the 1980s, and how Andy and his friend Bernard accidentally kind of bumped into this guy and found themselves almost in direct conflict with this guy. He seemed to have picked them up as being somehow a threat to what he was doing, and kind of ran with it. And anyone's interested to know more about the story, it's worth getting hold of The Black Alchemist. You can get it through Amazon. That's recently been re-released. And we kind of talked about that, and then talked more generally about sort of the occult, what it really is, that it's the occult term itself is only a reference to things that are hidden. There's not necessarily anything dark or evil about it, but people unfortunately tend to misinterpret it as being somehow dark, evil and sinister. So we try to dispel some of the myths around the occult, and sort of talked about what it really is about, or what it can be about, rather than what it's often perceived as being about by the general media. It kind of, a lot of the time you get in the media, as soon as you get anything kind of witchcrafty based, until fairly recently, they jump straight towards Satanism and devil worship and evil dark stuff, whereas it's not really the case at all. You know, it's just about discovering things, discovering knowledge, and sort of building a clearer understanding of how the world works, rather than just going on faith, which is what religion's about. Religion is about having faith in things, not questioning things. And as soon as you go into questioning anything, it can be seen as being detrimental or being against your faith. You can't be a person of faith and question at the same time. You know, unfortunately, there's a phrase, it's something along the lines of truth denies faith, and without faith, religion is nothing. And it's like, well, why should faith and truth have to be opposite each other? You know, why can you not be allowed to explore things? But that's been the problem throughout the sort of centuries. You know, anybody who explores things, who wants to ask questions of a god or supernatural powers, is seen as somehow in league with the devil, which is obviously something I'll comment a bit later on, because it's obviously one of the other shows I did later in the year. But that was really what Rich and I tried to explore, and try to sort of hopefully help a few people understand that it's not quite what people think it is. It doesn't have to be seen as such. It can be just the pursuit of knowledge.
So next up on that note, we had a man talking about the Highgate Vampire, another show that created a bit of animosity around it.
Somewhat. Good God, yes. I mean, that kind of it led in really from what I was just talking about, this assumption of certain activity. You must be doing something if you're following that kind of path or examining that kind of thing. And I think Dave would be the first to admit that maybe it was mishandled by some around him, and one person in particular has made great hay about the way in which things were handled, and has become a very unpleasant individual, to be honest with him. And obviously, you're going to mention any names because you get in trouble if you just mention this person's name, but he's turned wholeheartedly against David, even though they used to work together, or at least worked in parallel, should we say, not necessarily together, but working in parallel on a similar topic. But it all turned very nasty. But for me, it was fascinating to finally talk to David Frant, because it was someone I'd read about for years and never met, and was really interested to know more about. And as a consequence, he and I have met up a few times now. And him and his wife, Della, and I have discussed all sorts of things to do with the occult, witchcraft, and magic, and, of course, vampires, for sort of long into the night.
And, of course, about the same time, there was the Highgate Symposium, wasn't there?
Absolutely, yes, and that was a fantastic day, very enjoyable. And
That was coming later on, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. They were getting ready for that.
But I went from being going along as a reporter for the show to end up being on the symposium itself, which was quite fascinating, good fun.
Okay. Right, well, next up we have Ben Emlyn Jones. Mm-hmm. Talking about his conspiracy.
Yes. You're a foil for yourself, the other.
And... because we had a couple of shows that actually came through Conspiracy Files, because you followed on, didn't you, with your top 10 conspiracies?
Yeah, that was a bit later on in the year. We had Ben talked about various bits and bobs about conspiracy, which I found him quite a reasonable person to talk to, compared to some people who in the conspiracy field are a bit more over the top, should we say. But I did find him interesting to talk to, and I think we talked a little bit about a few things that would lead on to a show later on, because we, as I say, getting into June, we had the top 10 conspiracies, because I think it was another occasion we lost a guest at the last minute. That was to do with communication issues, wasn't it, rather than a no-show. They kept losing sound, so we kind of gave up. Yes, that's right. And that turned into a rather interesting debate, because I think I kind of poo-pooed pretty much every single one of the conspiracies, apart from the JFK thing, of course, which we can talk about a bit later on. But one in particular that got myself and Steve rather going was a discussion about 9/11, of course.
Yes, which led to another show later on in the year.
Absolutely, yeah. We got kind of caught up about the idea of what exactly did or didn't hit the towers and how exactly that actually happened. And without saying too much about the show to come on, the theory that was actually put forward by the guests we had the debate with, I still find surprising. And I still haven't received my copy of the book, which I ordered from the author about 4 or 5 months ago now. It still hasn't turned up.
Have to chase it up. But, we... I mean, you were arguing about the fact of not whether it happened or not, but what planes actually hit. Yes,
that was very much the debate, and I still, in my own position, but you can obviously talk yours, Steve. My position is still that it was what happened as was sold to us, but the reasons why it happened is the thing that needs to be looked at and questioned, how it came about and how the military and intelligence services completely, utterly failed to predict anything like this and to be able to do anything about it. And I think the conspiracy is the lack of foresight and knowledge and recognition of a potential danger. To me, there's the conspiracy, these idiots, the way they handled it.
Well, that spurned a show that we're going to talk about in a bit that happened in September. But here's one that we were a bit agog, if that's the right word, about Dick Larson.
I can't help but think Dick Larson's special agent.
Yes, me neither. So I always think that as well. But The Strange Messiah and the Saga of the Statue Not Drinking Milk.
Yes. As it was, I didn't know a lot about this particular character that Dick was proposing as being some messiah, but apparently he'd been around for some time, and Dick is by no means the only person who promotes him as being the messiah to save the world. Indeed, talking to my friend Richard, actually, was talking about earlier on, he and I had a conversation about this not long afterwards. He had heard of the character, and I forget what the guy's name is. It began with M, but I can't remember what it was. But there were certain things that Dick was saying that much of it was, take it or leave it. But when he started saying things that I knew were wrong, you have to step in. I mean, as you guys know, and our audience know, I am very fascinated by Hindu mythology and Krishna consciousness as something I've been an interest in. And he was saying that the Krishna consciousness people are looking for this figure to return, and this guy that I'm proposing is the Krishna for the New Age. And I'm thinking, well, no. If Krishna comes back, he will look exactly as it's supposed to look. Krishna, it'd be very obvious it's Krishna, wouldn't it?
Yeah, his name is Mataya.
That's the trap, that's the chap. He wouldn't go under another name, He would look blue, he would be large, he'd be Krishna blowing a pipe. So that was an error. And then when he started talking about the UK running out of milk because of a statue drinking episode that was happening in the 1980s, and I thought, I've never heard of it. That was came as a total surprise to me. And when I looked it up, there was one branch of, I think it was the Co-op, that ran low on milk in the Midlands because one statue of Ganesh, which is the head, the elephant-headed god Ganesh, was apparently drinking milk. But when that was investigated, it appeared it was just a process called capillary process that was causing the milk to be drawn up from the bowl along its trunk and then going down its body. So it was actually explainable scientifically, but it was one statue in one temple in the Midlands, and one branch, I think it was the Co-op, was running short of milk. And he was presenting it as if it was a mass shortage of milk across the UK. And I thought, well, if your information is rather inaccurate at one point, you start having to question the other things the guy is saying. And obviously not going to go into detail here, but it just didn't add up, did it? It was fascinating. It was always interesting to hear these people. And part of me often wishes I had this kind of faith in these things, these messiahs and these great leaders of the future.
Yeah, I mean,
don't.
when he started saying that, was it Matteo? He said had already done interviews with the BBC and the likes, but been told them not to broadcast them.
Again, that's not the BBC.
He lost me completely. But I mean, thinking strictly lateral here, the guy is repeating stuff that one person has written about.
Oh, absolutely.
Which to me sounds very much like a cult.
It is. It's definitely that kind of mentality of the great cult leader.
Yeah.
He will lead you to a new dawn. Yeah. Much like the Scientology people, that kind of sire figure.
That kind of thing worries me.
Absolutely, right. I agree completely. And unfortunately, we are predisposed to look for these sorts of things.
But having said that, I was quite willing to, as Sue was, to give the guy a voice. And,
absolutely.
And tell us his point of view, but personally, I didn't get it.
Well, sometimes, I'll be honest with you, you have to give these people enough rope to hang themselves until they start talking twaddle. You think, okay, now you really have, we give you the chance, but you're kind of losing the plot a bit here. But, the idea that the BBC have interviewed this guy but have not yet shown it, well, the BBC belongs to us. We pay the licence fee, so we should demand to be able to see the thing. If this interview exists at all, we should demand our rights to see it. But, there we go.
I mean, but would the BBC really not tell us that the new Messiah had turned up?
Well, I suppose those
it's big news, isn't it?
Well, I think those in the conspiracy world will say absolutely yes, of course they'll keep these things secret. But one of the things, just jumping subject slightly for a second, talking about conspiracies again, because we're going to come back onto that, it suddenly struck me that we have people out there who will say that X, Y, Z in the media is not really true. This is what's really happening. And I thought to myself, why should I believe you? Why would you be right and they be wrong? What specifically about you, whoever you might be, people like David Icke, etc., why should you be right? Why have you got it right and they've got it wrong? Why don't you both be wrong? Some other conspiracy going on. You can't both be right because the theories are too different. But why should you be right and they be wrong? That kind of thing. It's like this guy's offering this chap up as being the great Messiah. Well, why does he need people to tell us about this Messiah? If this Messiah is so great, we should know about him anyway. He should be everywhere. Why would he be kept secret? And, I just find that difficult to kind of, unless it's all about power and control again, of course, this is probably what it all comes down to. But fascinating stuff. But yeah, moving on again, in August, it had what I think is one of your guys' favourite guests.
Yes, Angus Dinsdale.
Very much so.
He was talking about his book, The Man Who Filmed Nessie, which was his father, and he was telling us about times when he was young, when he was a schoolboy and or a little boy, and holidays would be actually hunting for Nessie, and it was so fascinating, wasn't it, Steve?
Yeah, it was. To me, it was because it was behind the scenes.
Yes.
It wasn't about Nessie. It was about him and his dad and what the family went through to try and actually find the truth.
And about his holidays that he had with his family in the caravan and what they did and he'd be actually looking for Nessie as well. It was just so, it was fascinating.
standing up in class and being asked,
What my dad
What
does.
does your dad do? He hunts monsters.
Yeah, you know what I mean,
The
Andy?
monster
It was
hunter.
just so fascinating learning it from that side. You know, you hear all the hype about Nessie and blah blah blah, and it's not real, but this that and the other. But to actually have somebody who lived it, you know what I mean, and was watching his dad go through this and using money that he didn't have to do this, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and and when he did get the actual footage that made everything famous, it was a complete accident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so that was fascinating. That's what I liked about the show. You know what I mean,
Yeah.
Andy?
Yeah, as you know, cryptozoology is not really a field of that interest in, but Nessie is one of those ones that stands out as being fascinating. Now, I think I told you guys at the time, but in case I forgot, while I was at school finishing sixth form, myself and a friend Alan had decided we were going to spend a week in the summer camping at Loch Ness to look out for Nessie ourselves. We never actually did it, but we did talk about it. About get ourselves a good tent and getting the train up there. And we were kind of stuck at sort of 16, 17 years old as to how the hell we were actually going to get to Loch Ness itself, because it's fairly remote. You know, if you don't drive, there's no train station.
Well, this is
So
it.
we couldn't have really done it, but we did talk about it as being a bit of a fun thing to do for a week. Spend a week looking out for Nessie. So
But that's what I liked about the show. We both liked about the show. You know, it wasn't a matter of fact. This is what I think. Blah blah blah. And you know what I mean. It was more. It was the fact that we were seeing it through the eyes of this young lad who is now a man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, don't get us wrong. He did give us an opinion as to what he thinks it might be.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
But it was more about what they went through as a family, and that was interesting. It's something we don't hear about.
Yeah.
We hear, like Sue said, you hear about all the hype, but you don't hear about the struggles that the family goes through because of it.
No.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And that to me was more interesting.
Definitely.
Absolutely. It's as I say, it's one of those areas that is worth exploring and can produce real results. I mean, as we know, a guest later in the year we had, of course, Richard Freeman. Well, they've actually, they've found these things. They've actually found things, animals, creatures that are supposed to be extinct or died out or mythological, and they actually exist. So, I mean, I don't think we mentioned another show about cryptozoology, but I'm just fascinated by the guy looking for the pink-headed duck. That just really tickled me. I'm quite fascinated. I've looked at it a few times now, looking at this information about the pink-headed duck. It seems so harmless, but yeah, I know he's been threatened and all sorts of strange things have happened to him in his hunts for the pink-headed duck, haven't
Perhaps
they?
I should get Richard on the show.
Yeah, he's
And
Yeah.
just talk
he'd
about
come on.
his expeditions and how he's coped with them.
Absolutely.
He's nearly died twice, didn't he?
He has.
He got run over by a motorbike, didn't he?
Yeah.
Just looking for a duck.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
ended up in hospital.
Yeah, it's
So,
crazy.
but no, it makes me feel proud, the fact that these men and women have passion in trying to find these things. And like I've always said, where cryptozoology is concerned, it's if we didn't have them there, we wouldn't have the gorilla, we wouldn't have the giraffe, you know what I mean, the camel and stuff like that.
Well, we would. We just wouldn't know they were there, would we?
Well, no,
Exactly.
They're
Still
but
be
you,
there,
you,
just
you
haven't found.
understand what I mean, though, don't
Yeah.
you? You know what I mean? But we wouldn't have these creatures. There would just be monsters in the forest somewhere or something.
Yeah.
And fables, and because that's what they start off with, don't they?
Absolutely,
They actually
yeah.
start off with the fact, there's a story about this
There's
monster.
a hairy man running around the woods.
Yeah, and that's what it would only be, is a story. There's supposed to be a man running around the woods that's full of hair. There's supposed to be a big dragon, and there you have it. We've got the Komodo dragon. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely, yeah.
things like
yeah.
that. But then we had September, which ended up being a conspiracy month.
It did.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly planned that way. Just
No, it wasn't. It's just the way it
kind
fell.
of fell, as it were.
We started with your favourite.
Yeah,
Mr.
the old
JFK.
JFK assassination. Which is, I won't bore over with the whole story again, but it is just absolutely fascinating me. As I said, I didn't see the JFK film by Oliver Stone at the cinema. I missed it. I ended up seeing it on video, all 3.25 hours of it, and I watched the whole thing from start to finish, rewound it, watched it all again, because I couldn't believe what I was watching. And for me, that's been again, as I said on the show repeatedly, it's one of the most important events of the 21st century, post-World War II, because of the way the whole world changed direction following his assassination.
Yeah.
And the evidence that suggests that, very strongly suggests that, one, Oswald, the supposed lone nut assassin, couldn't possibly have operated by himself, and two, that elements of the cover-up and the conspiracy prior to the assassination would have to have involved elements of the American government. There's no two ways around it. You can't get past those facts. And to me, it's like a boiled on the American dream, if you like. It's this real problem with the American dream.
Yeah.
That the American dream also includes the ability to assassinate your own leader, which is quite scary.
The week before you did the JFK incident, we had an incident of our own.
You did?
Yes.
Remind me.
It was my birthday, and we had a guest on. And unfortunately, it's now called The Missing Show.
Oh, of course. I forget. I do remember where it was in the month. I knew it was that month, but I can't remember where. Yes, that was... we're not going to go into the details of what really happened on that night, except I want to make clear for the umpteenth zillionth time, we do not edit anybody. We do not censor anybody. Occasionally shows don't appear, but that's usually because it's been agreed by ourselves and the guest that somewhere along the lines, either us or them or both don't appear in the best light. Things have got a little bit out of hand because we are dealing with controversial subjects, particularly conspiracy subjects are controversial, and sometimes things get a bit heated. But we don't edit the shows. We have occasionally put up and taken down because there's been profanities which we'd rather not have on there. Sometimes more too detailed a location has been given away about where a guest is and things like that, or just the sound quality is not so great. We've decided to clear them up.
Yes,
But
you
we
will
don't-
notice on some of the replays that there are some on there that I've actually put sorry about the sound quality, but if there's been any that have been really bad, then touch wood, we haven't had many that we have actually had to pull. But I don't think I can actually count them on my hand how many I've pulled. I think it's only been 2 or 3.
Yeah,
but,
in 3 years.
But unfortunately, this one was at the request of the guest, wasn't it, Andy?
Yes, I mean, we discussed it and we thought ourselves it didn't present either us or him in a very good light because it all got very heated and out of hand. It's still to this day a mystery because he's been on the show before and never reacted the way he reacted this time. So
No, it was out of character.
Out of
character.
Yeah.
But he did
Absolutely.
admit that he was tired, so...
yeah.
You know.
And it was-
He
it
had been
seemed
tired,
that-
and he had been having a few problems with
Yeah.
other things at the time.
But over that, when we had the other conspiracy show, which was the 9/11 debate.
which I thought was a real success. I thought it went down really well. I think Ben and I both definitely came from very different directions about the conspiracy or the events of 9/11, shall we say, but we both... I think it was the antithesis of that first week's show, the one we're talking about that got pulled. It was completely opposite. It was sensible, intelligent, although some of the people who actually were posting things about the show kind of got the wrong end of the stick a bit and expected some kind of verbal warfare to break out and seemed disappointed when it didn't happen. But I do think we both learnt things about the events of 9/11. I think we all learnt things about the events of 9/11 that are questions to be answered. I mean, I to this day, I'm not a big fan of the conspiracy version of events that Ben proposes. I see lots of problems with it, but I think we both agreed there were other things that are we both agree were wrong and strange, and one not least, of course, is the World Trade Center 7's collapse, the building that collapsed hours later that apparently was still standing free and unharmed, although on fire, in an interview with a BBC reporter who said it had already collapsed when you could see it in the background. It didn't actually fall for 20 minutes after they spoke of it already having collapsed, which beggars belief as to what was going on there. That one was very strange, and it was the only other building in a close-knit collection of buildings that actually did collapse.
Yes.
And the fact that one of the floors was CIA office records makes you wonder, really, what on earth was going on with that one. I mean, again, I'm not saying it was definitely deliberately blown up, although we did talk about that possible theory. And one of the things I'd just like to highlight briefly, there's a video I found on YouTube, which I put on my own Facebook page, which is fascinating, with a guy who works in the steel industry, who actually makes things with metal, and pointed out that although the metal didn't have to melt at the temperature it was said, he was saying basically the temperature was too low to melt steel, but as he showed, a temperature way below the melting point of steel, but still sufficiently hot that the kind of heat could be generated by jet engine fuel burning was enough to make the metal so soft he could bend it with his little finger. So his point was that it doesn't have to have melted; it just means it's so softly collapsed. So he said he didn't know if there's a conspiracy or not, but he just wanted to set the record straight on the physics of the effect of the jet fuel burning. He said it's sufficiently hot to melt, to make steel soft enough to bend very, very easily, and that was his point. It doesn't melt; it just bends easily.
Yeah.
But it is definitely an area that I think we were all in agreement. There's something wrong with the whole events of 9/11, whether it's, as I put forward, that it was mishandled from the beginning by the American government and they failed to act upon credible information for whatever reason, or the all-out, the directed energy weapons effect, as Ben put forward as being his proposal for the events.
And a lot of people are asking the question, why wasn't the Air Force there when it should have been? And it took way too long to scramble them up.
Yes, I mean, the events themselves, it was as if America was asleep that day, literally. There was just so dozy. There's something wrong with that.
Yeah, there's the building, help yourself.
It's kind of like, I mean, I go along with the possibility that the CIA, military intelligence, had an idea something was going to happen, and we used it to their benefit to ramp up security, etc., with no idea of the scale of what was going to happen, and had they known, they would have done more to prevent it. I mean, I tend to lean that way, but without sort of rehashing the entire debate again, which you could easily do. I think what we can say is that the bill of goods that we've been sold by the American government about the events, there are questions. No matter what questions there are and how far those questions go is open to debate, but there are definitely questions.
Yeah, and they had suspects up and searching from practically within hours, and a lot of them were found to be false.
Yeah, I say there are problems. However you look at it, there are definitely problems.
Yeah.
And of course, you mentioned the CIA there, and if JFK had his way, there wouldn't have been the CIA.
Well, exactly the point as well. I mean, this is one of the other things. I think it comes down to I think again.
Not as we know it, anyway.
Say again?
Not as we know it, anyway.
No, definitely not. And I do think because they were involved, I believe, in the conspiracy, certainly the cover-up afterwards of the JFK assassination, they did see themselves as omnipresent, that they had supreme power. They were more powerful than the president because they'd knocked the president, or at least helped cover up the death of the president. But that's another story.
Yeah. Okay. Well, next up we have your next solo show, John D. Can you briefly tell us about John D?
Sure. Well, that was actually entirely solo, wasn't it? It was just me waffling on for a couple of hours about John D. Yes. John D is an Elizabethan astronomer.
I think we did pop in and ask you a couple of questions.
Towards the end, yeah.
Because we was away, wasn't we?
Which is me broadcasting, which is quite fun. But it was Elizabethan astrologer, Elizabeth I. He was a close confidant of the Queen at the time. He was also responsible for choosing the date of her coronation, which was chosen for longevity of her reign, which of course it was, very long indeed. I think it was the third longest in history. But he was also a magician and was interested in communicating with angels and God himself, which comes back to the saying before about faith and knowledge, where he wasn't happy with the knowledge he had of the world. He wanted more, and he was probably one of the most intelligent people around at the time. So he began Enochian experiments that had become known, communications with angels using crystal balls, and he is the originator of the concept of communicating with supernatural via crystal balls. He was the first to do that and has become synonymous with the idea. But also obsidian mirrors, and obsidian's a black stone which has a mirror-like effect, which he would use to communicate. Now, John Dee himself couldn't actually see or hear these spiritual beings, but he had a chap called Edward Kelly who apparently could see them in the stone and would describe exactly what he was seeing to John Dee. And Dee would write down the communications. And over a few years, they built up hundreds of pages of the communications with angels. Now, these communications included a system of magic, which became known as Enochian magic. And there have been various books written about it over the centuries. It kind of disappeared until the 1970s when a book was republished called The True and Faithful Relation of what passed for many years between Dr. John Dee and some spirits, which effectively was Dee's spiritual personal diaries of these communications.
Okay.
It was really published in the 1600s, but it kind of disappeared into obscurity until the 1970s when a chap called Stephen Skinner reproduced the book. And I have a copy myself, which is one of my prized possessions because it's quite rare and quite expensive. Not the original one, I would love to have that, so that's worth thousands, but even the 1970s reprint in full goatskin leather, which is an exact replica of the original 1600s book. which I've got a copy of, so I'm very pleased with. But anyway,
Sounds good.
You were able to build a kind of magical system from the diary records, which included communications with these supernatural entities, which involved vision quests, if you like, mystery journeys in the mind, or other planets, or other realities, or however you want to put it. And you have mystical visions and experiences communicating with these angels. And as you know, I've written a book of my personal experiences working with Enochian magic, albeit more than 10 years ago now, but it's finally, in the last couple of weeks, actually physically in print and available to order from my publisher.
No.
Which is a relief, because it's
not.
taken so bloody long.
It's not, is it?
Huh?
It's not, is it?
Oh, it might be, yeah.
Oh, right.
But what I haven't mentioned before, I'm sure, is the mysterious journey the book's gone through to actually get to being published. So I originally wrote it back in about 2000, 2001, so 15 years ago. It went to the one publisher. It was going to be one of the 2 inaugural books of his publishing company. The first one came out and didn't sell particularly well. Then we had a bit of a falling out, I have to admit, and he decided that I didn't want really him publishing it. And I'm quite glad, because the version that finally came out last week is quite different to the original. They made quite a lot of changes. But his publishing company, for whatever reason, that was it. They only ever published the one book, and he never went any further. So they went to a second publisher, who within the space of a few months had their offices where the pub printed from got flooded, and their offices had the ceiling collapse in. So money had to get diverted from publishing projects, from publishing, to actually getting the house repaired and the offices repaired. So it was kind of cursed.
Yeah, me and
Then
Sue
went to my current publisher. Some of the art, the individual art within had to be slightly redrawn, and unfortunately the artist he's had an illness in the family, which delayed that. So, where it should have been out probably about May or June of this year, it's finally come out in December.
What are you going to say,
he's
Steve?
almost
Yeah,
in
me and
public
Sue
stuff.
thought there was a conspiracy about it,
Well, cursed, certainly.
trying to stop you from printing.
On the subject of books, our next show we're going to talk about is Neil Spring and his book The Ghost Hunters, which the show, the programme, the drama is actually on as we speak. It started at 9 o'clock.
Oh, did it? Oh, blimey, I've missed it.
It will start again at 10 if you've got a planner.
Yeah, I'll have to.
But basically...
Yeah, we've got it recording, haven't we?
We've got it recording, but I'm interested to see it because I've read the book and I enjoyed the book. But Neil did say that they've kept to the book, but I'm a bit concerned because all the actual trailers that I've seen on ITV, I've not recognised anything, to be honest with you. So I'm yet to see, so I'll give my opinions about that next week. But I did enjoy the book, though. I really enjoyed that. Next we're back going into November now. We speak to Antonio Paris, Professor Antonio Paris, I may add. Now, the reason why I got this guy on, because I found him on another show talking about Skinwalker Ranch. And we previously had somebody on who wrote about the Skinwalker Ranch as an article. So I assumed that he'd been there, and he hadn't. And so I assumed the same with Mr. Paris. But unfortunately, he hasn't either. But he has done a film about Skinwalker Ranch.
And he's been as close to it as possible.
Yes, so he gave us his opinions of it and his research into it and what have you. But to actually have been there, it was a bit of a letdown, wasn't it, Andy?
Yes, it was one of those things we really were hoping to get an inside track on exactly what the hell's going on at this place.
I don't think anybody's been there.
Absolutely fascinating. Sorry?
I don't think anybody's been there.
Yeah,
Well, I think they have, just we can't get hold of them.
Yeah,
the security is so tight
Yeah.
there, isn't it?
Yeah. And the
So,
fact
but
been
it's
bought by
quite
this-
interesting that the people that are security there are actually security at Area 51 as well.
That I find surprising, that someone like that has got private security, but then I suppose it's America for you.
Precisely.
You
And
bet
then
the government do it.
the week later we had David Rowntree
Oh,
on.
hold on.
Oh,
What are you-
darling.
Do you want to talk about Skinwalker?
Go on then.
That's just, I find the place absolutely fascinating. Just all these various stories that have come out about it. You know, is it haunted? Is it paranormal dimensions? Is it UFO landings? Well, it seems to be all of them. Cryptozoology, giant bulletproof wolves. You know, you name it in the world of the paranormal, it happens at Skinwalker apparently. And you wonder if there's something about the place itself that maybe a lot of it could be exaggerated or misreported, but it suggests something strange is going on there.
It's all to do with shape-shifting.
Yes, and the idea that there are places on the earth that you could describe as having the veil between this reality and the next or another reality is thinner, and weird stuff happens. I mean, we know that someone particularly, and a few other people, mainly one person in particular, promoted Cannock Chase as being a similar kind of place. I mean, from my own experiences investigating the place Woodchester Mansion, there's lots of strange stuff that goes on in the whole valley, not just the mansion itself, but the actual Woodchester Country Park. Other strange things have been reported and cited in that valley that are not related to the house at all. So the idea that maybe there are places around the earth that are more prone to strange activity, you know, I think it's possible, certainly a possibility. And I think with Skinwalker, because there's been so much reported over the years, there's got to be something to it. I can't believe that it's all been made up or misrepresented. There's something going on there that, you know, I'd love to get to the bottom of, but unfortunately it doesn't look we're ever going to find a guest who's actually been in the places who's prepared to talk about it.
No, this is
There was a story about it where they went out feeding the animals. When they turn around and come back, they were all dead behind them.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing. It's like, what on earth is going on?
Yeah, so be a place that we'll never find out, I don't think, unless we can find somebody
unfortunately, from the sounds of it, we're never going to find someone who's prepared to come on and talk about it.
Maybe we should try and get hold of the owner.
Maybe. Right,
Yeah,
as I was saying, 8th of November, David Rowntree.
1st of November, dear.
No, that was...
No, sorry, my mistake. My mistake.
8th of November. It was our anniversary show of the KTPF. Not the actual show, the actual website. So,
when it all started.
But David Rowntree came on and talked about wormholes and Einstein Rosenberg theory
Bridge.
or whatever.
The Rosenberg Bridge.
And
And a lot of physics and stuff,
Yes.
which, to be honest, I know nothing about, and it went straight over my head. But a lot of what he was saying made perfect sense.
Yes,
Did it
I
not?
agree entirely. It fits as a possibility of explaining a lot of paranormal type activity and the causes of it. The idea of wormholes effectively causing distortions in space-time around us that can result in these effects. I know he's done a lot of research, obviously, in audio as well, EVP type phenomena, that again kind of fits in with what he's talking about. So, you know, I think it's research that it warrants greater investigation and greater publicity, I think, for it. But it's not getting it because so often it's the problem. It's complex and people expect answers to be simple, and unfortunately, they're probably not. You know, how these phenomena occur. It's one of those things I remember reading years ago, that if you don't find yourself having a major headache and feeling completely spaced out trying to learn about quantum physics, you haven't understood it. Because it's that strange a phenomena that you can't just say, oh, I get it now, I've read this and it makes sense to me. Well, if you're not having a head explosion, it's not making sense to you because it is that bizarre. And it does tie with what Rowntree was talking about. I do find it absolutely fascinating, this possibility that what we're experiencing, these phenomena, are to do with distortions in space-time and wormholes, effectively, things coming from other parts of the universe around us. I mean, it's entirely possible. It's as good as an explanation as any other, I think, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because when it comes to physics, nothing is what it seems.
Absolutely. It all falls to pieces.
I mean, they're basically telling you that I'm sitting here talking to a mic that doesn't exist.
Yeah. It's
not there. It's what I'm thinking makes it so.
yeah. Right, so the last show we're going to talk about is one of Steve's favourites.
Yes.
John Kaneko James.
John Kaneko James. This to me was firstly very interesting because I spent a lot of my life in London. Okay, southwest London and not the area he was talking about, but it was interesting to find all these different ghost stories, and he had one of those voices that you could just listen to.
Welsh accent.
Yeah, it could just, I mean, the only thing that bugged us a bit was he kept going, but
No, that wasn't him.
No,
that was the other
Somebody
chap.
else.
somebody else was it, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but no, John was brilliant. I really enjoyed listening to the guy. He told us some great stories. He even, when Sue asked him about going over to the Ripper area, I mean, he said you got so many tour guys over there doing that, they run into each other and end up with fights.
Yeah.
Fights with each other, which is not this is entirely believable. Some of the ones I've met is definitely very believable. I mean, I've done little private tours myself, taking a few friends around and got glared at for just standing and talking to a bunch of people, saying, "Well, it's my friends and family, so mind your business."
Yeah.
But yes, they are a bit guarding of their territory, particularly one site, which I'm sure John can tell you the same thing. The Mitre Square, you kind of know where exactly the body was found because you look at the old drawings. But if you try and stand in that spot and you're not a Ripper guide that's recognised as such, you might well find getting stones thrown at you for standing on that spot. So, yeah, it is true.
It was quite fascinating to find out what paranormal acts were actually happening, or foreteeing, I should say, around the Great Fire of London as well.
Yes, and it was fascinating.
Yeah, that and all the plague pits that are there.
So yeah, that was a fascinating subject. Don't forget, guys, you can listen to all these subjects on our YouTube channel. You can listen to the last 4 podcasts via our webpage. They will be rotated, obviously, each week, but you will be able to catch them on the YouTube channel. And I hope you've enjoyed them as much as we have bringing them to you. That's basically all we're going to talk about on them shows that have been in 2015. But now we're 2015.
We're going back in time.
So now
time travel is worth it.
Now we're going to tell you what's coming up in 2016.
Yes.
Okay, well, next week we have Jeff Mudgett. As we mentioned him earlier, Jeff Mudgett is going to talk about his great-great-grandfather, the notorious serial killer H.H. Holmes, and his murder castle, or whatever it was called, and find out what he might have found out since we last spoke to him about 2 years ago. The
man had one weird hole. He'd put a body down a chute and it'd end up going all over the place and end up in specific areas.
So he had a very, very big basement, didn't he?
Yes.
So, and he was a notorious killer.
Most of it was for money and stuff, but he was cutting up bodies and all sorts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
really,
and as we mentioned earlier, he does think that maybe one of the Ripper murders were actually done by H.H. Holmes.
Yes, he was in London at the time, and then he went into Europe. And by all accounts, there was a few notorious murders over there.
Yes.
But we are talking about a time when murder was prolific.
Yes.
Yes. We didn't have the ability to investigate crimes like that as we do today. And what people, that's the thing with the East End. A murder a week wasn't uncommon. Unfortunately, what made the Ripper murders themselves stand out, of course, was the ferocity and the violence involved in them. We weren't talking about just straight stabbings or things of that nature. Talking about much more dramatic killing. But by the same token, it's as we were saying before, H.H. Holmes' modus operandi, if you like, was too different to have been anything like linked to the Ripper. But again, we'll have a chat. I think you've informed me, I guess, in advance that you've got a bit of a Ripperologist as part of the crew anyway.
I will be
ready for that.
He could have tried to emulate and so blame somebody else for it. I don't know.
Yeah. So
especially being in a strange country and without his Tower Castle.
Okay, so the following week we've got David M. Goody, if that's how you spell it, Goody.
Goody.
He's going to be talking about his book, A Guest in My Home, or A Guest in My House. David sits down with over 70 spirits and interviews them, and he finds out when, where and how they died, also what it's like on the other side. So that should be interesting.
Yep, that's one way of putting it.
Susan Laybourne is next. She's going to be talking about the mechanics of mediumship.
That's going to be interesting, actually.
Following her, we have Heidi Hollis on shadow people. Now, Heidi is a truth seeker of the unknown and a foremost expert on shadow people and the Hat Man phenomena. She actually is the person that gave them their descriptive names.
She is.
She is. She's the one who actually gave them the name, the Hat Man, apparently.
Now, it's interesting because we're talking about shadow people.
Yes.
I'm not talking about slender people.
No, you know the Hat Man and whatever, yeah? We're talking about shadow people and the Hat Man phenomena.
Okay. He's not from Hatmandu, is he?
What?
Not from Hatmandu.
No. And she actually, you know the names that they're given, the Hat Man and whatever?
Yes. Yeah,
she actually was the person that gave them the names.
Oh, okay.
Right? And then we've got Tracy Ash, who's going to be talking about the ancient Egyptian celestial healing. She's going to share her research on new scientific and historical evidence on ancient knowledge technologies to accelerate miracles in your life and the world. So that's what we've got coming up in January. Other guests that we've got coming on in the new year, we've got a dream expert coming on. Nick Redfern talking about chupacabras. Now, somebody mentioned about chupacabras recently, so that might be interesting for them. I'm not sure whether it was Brendan. And
it was actually, yeah.
And Derek Akora returns.
Oh, is he?
Yes.
Oh, that was going back. Excellent.
And to tell us about life after Most Haunted. So if you want to hear anything about Most Haunted, I warn you now.
We're not talking
about Most Haunted. If you want to hear about his time in Most Haunted, go onto the YouTube channel and look for Derek Akora's show, and you will hear it there, okay? It has been edited, I will warn you now, because there were some things we had to take out for legal reasons. But apart from that,
yes, we only lost about 3 minutes out of it.
About 3 minutes out of it. But
so just to rephrase what we said earlier, we only edit if we're told to legally.
Yes.
We have no choice in the matter.
We were actually told after his wife listened to it, and she told me to nip out 3 minutes. So apart from that, everything's fine. But yes, if you want to hear anything about Most Haunted, where Derek's concerned, go to the YouTube channel, because it will not be in the next show.
And of course, at the moment, he has a new show.
Yes, it's starting up this week or something, or next week.
Yes. Haunted Past.
Haunted Past or something like that. We're going to find out more about that as well.
I might watch an episode to see what it's all about.
But yes. So that's what's coming up in the new year, Andy.
Yeah, all sounds good to me. I'm sure I'll end up doing 1 or 2 shows of my own, or I'll be the guest talking about something as usual.
Yeah, sure you will. Well, we're actually
figure out what's going to be our backup show, of course, because we've used our backup shows for no-show guests.
Well, we're actually booked up to April at the moment, so we've got April to fill. So
yeah, I think what I mean is occasionally, not very often, we've had a couple of times when the guest has not been able to make it for one reason or another.
No.
And we've always had backup plans, and at the moment we're lacking in any backup plans, so we need to come up with something.
And so don't forget, if there's anything you might be interested in, then give us a shout. We can see if we can find out about a subject for you and get somebody on the show to talk about it. You can just let us know by contacting show@ktpf.co.uk. And don't forget, our issue 7 of our magazine is now out, that accompanies the show. And it's got contributions from many names within the topics we cover, plus our regular features. You can find out more about that by clicking on our menu bar, on which says magazine. And apart from that, I think that's it.
Well, that's the one thing we've got to mention about during the year, of course, was the launch of the magazine back in April, which very pleased with. It is it's more involved than I thought it was going to be, perfectly honest, which is why we've gone down to buy a monthly rather than a monthly edition. But it is good fun to put together, and so hopefully we shall get some more interesting articles throughout the year from our guests. But of course, anybody out there listening is more than happy to have anything you've got to say in the magazine. If you want to send in your stories or articles to us, either by email or on the Facebook page or any other method. So, we can't guarantee I'll put everything in, because partly don't have enough time to fit it all in sometimes. But so I can't guarantee it. But certainly anything that gets sent to us will be read and certainly considered. It'll be great.
Yes, definitely. Well, we hope you've enjoyed the show tonight and throughout 2015, and that you will join us again in 2016 as we look forward to your company again next week from 8 p.m. on www.ktpf.co.uk, DM Radio and Worsley Radio. Okay, and all that's left to say is Happy New Year to you all. That's coming up next. And Steve?
Yes, and definitely thanks for listening to the KTPF Community Talk Show, which is supported by Phenomena Magazine and Pion Parisi.
And supported by our own magazine as well.
Yes. Definitely.
Definitely.
Sorted by our own magazine. Right, so all that's left to say is that it's good night from me.
And it's good night from her.
And good night from them.
Until next year.
Indeed.
All we can say is, until then,
keep the paranormal
friendly.
Good night and God bless.
Good night, guys.
This is where it's at.
From ghoulies and ghosties and long-legged beasties and things that go bump in the night, Visit our ghost store and next time you might be able to show what just gave you a fright.
So for all of your investigation needs, with over 100 products in stock waiting for dispatch within 24 hours, you need to visit theukghoststore.com.